I'd like to open up the March, gosh, what day is it? The 19th, March 19th, 2025 Planning Board meeting. I'm calling us to order, and let's do the Pledge of Allegiance, and maybe Dan will lead us in that.
Sure. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Right. Thank you. Declaration of a quorum. We have a quorum, and let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So, yeah, you could vote if you want to, but you don't need to vote.
Yep.
Let's introduce board members and staff, starting with Lori.
Lori Rice from, where am I from? Great Island.
Howard Levitan, Oars Island.
Amy Heibel, Harpswell.
Dan Hobeck, Oars Island.
Courtney Snellings, I'm just going to say Harpswell. I think it's too divisive to always be saying exactly where
That's why
we're
I
from.
do it.
So,
All right, well, I'm not going to do that, Courtney. Christine Donovan Hall, Oars Island.
And I'm Margaret McIntyre, the interim town planner.
Okay, thank you. All right, we have one, do we have any old business? I don't think-
No old business.
Okay, no old business. Our new business is Cribstone Holdings LLC, CEO Ethan Morgan, who's the owner, and the town of Harpswell, harbor master, Paul Plummer. And what we are here today to do is take a look at the possible use of the harbor master's office at the Cook's lobster property, and I'd like to ask Margaret if she would just sort of introduce this project to us and summarize what it's all about.
Yeah, I can do it to a certain extent. Paul might have something to add, but the goal of this is to, I think the harbor master's goal is to get an office closer to his boat and on the water, to improve call times, improve efficiency. One of the big, in public safety, obviously, but one of the big problems that he was running into is that to have a centrally located spot, Mitchell Field is obviously available, but it's not centrally located. There are some town-owned properties that are centrally located, but they're not very feasible for building a wharf, having a building, having parking, like Wharf Road, off Hildreth Road, or by Hildreth Road. Or there's like the landing at Merritt House, Merritt House Road. That's also no parking. It's not really feasible, plus there'd be a big expense. So then he started looking at a location that's existing, and what he ran into is a lot of the locations that were available are in the commercial fishing zone, and the harbor master, which is municipal, is an institutional use, and that is non-conforming in the commercial fishing zone. So a kind of creative solution that we came up with is to have him use an area that's already non-conforming in regards to use and just change that to an institutional use. And so that's the project that's being presented to you tonight.
Thank you, that's a great summary. So, Paul, would you like to just describe your project for us and answer any questions that the board might have?
Sure. So good evening, Paul Plummer, the town's harbor master. The planner described it perfectly. So it's to become more efficient in our daily operations as well as our emergency call-outs. Currently, the office is here at the town office, and we keep the boat down in Gunpoint at the deputy harbor master's house. When he's home and available, it's great. But when he leaves town on his days off, and then for us or the deputies that are authorized to use the boat, for us to go down all the way to Gunpoint to get on the boat, unload it, or unpack it, I should say, put the canvas up, it takes us about 15, 20 minutes, and that's from right here. So this would just provide us to be right next to the boat, We could jump on, we could go. Something as simple as going to check an aquaculture proposal or a mooring proposal, something that would take half a day to leave the office and go do all that and come right back will take us half hour to get back to the office and do what we need to do. But yeah, no, the planner described it perfectly, and I think this is just going to increase our efficiency in the duties that we do.
Thank you. Thank you. And most of us were on the site walk, so we've been to the property and seen it. And yeah, it looks like a great find. We're happy that we seem to have worked out a solution. So thank you very much.
Yes, thank you.
All right.
Yeah.
Oh, you have a question?
Yeah, I
Okay.
just have, it's something that we observe, but I think it's important that people understand this as well. So this location is just for your office. It isn't a place where people would come in and get mooring permits or anything. Is that right?
Correct. So we're going to have signage as you kind of approach onto the wharf, but to keep out of the way of the commercial operation that's happening, that explains how to get a hold of the harbor master. So whether that's email, whether that's a phone call, but they are not going to be authorized to come up to the building and go upstairs to the office space. The administration did check with the town's insurance, and they said as long as we keep all of the public out, there'll be no consideration of discrimination against anybody.
Okay.
So it'll be for staff use only.
And you checked with MMA as well, also?
Yes,
Yep.
yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
And I just had a couple of questions. The first one was, there already was an office use within that space, correct? There was an
Yes.
auditor or an accountant that was there or is there now?
Yep, yes.
Why did you think, Margaret, that it was a change of use under the definitions?
Because it's going just from commercial to institutional. Because Paul is considered an institutional use, or the harbor master.
But the use is
Come on in.
office use, correct?
Yes.
That doesn't change.
No.
I think you could legitimately, using the definition in the definitions,
Yeah.
then
You know, we talked
talks
about
about
that.
change of use,
We
Yeah.
that you don't even need to get this.
we did
Perfectly
talk
willing
about
to
that.
Deal with it on that one.
We decided to err on the side of transparency, just so there was a really good paper trail to show that we discussed it, and show that you guys made these findings.
That's exactly why. I think you're right, that we probably could have just, given the go-ahead, but we really did want to be transparent in this. Thank you. Thank you for that. Anybody else have any questions?
Yeah, I had a question. There was reference to hazardous materials that you might be transporting. I was just wondering what those would be. Is it like gas because someone's out of fuel, or?
So we carry a 14-gallon spare tank on the boat. And so if we have to fill that up at the gas station, if we don't choose to get it at a marina and go to a gas station, we may have to it has wheels, wheel it down the wharf, get it onto the boat. Things like buoy paint for when we do the channel markers. So
You're
items
not
like that.
storing it.
No.
I saw there was reference to not storing it.
Right,
Okay,
correct.
thanks.
Where do you store that stuff now?
It's a mix between Mitchell Field and the town office, depending on what it is.
Right, okay. Anybody else?
And for anyone just listening, I left out, we will still maintain office space here at the town office. So if folks want to meet anyone in the department staff, we can still hold office space here.
And there's a time frame, April through December, I think, that you're going to be there. Is that
I
correct?
believe that's what it was, yes.
Yep.
I'm looking at the owner of the wharf. I can't remember what
Yeah, I
we
think it was-
decided on, but it was in there.
Yeah, I think it's in the application, it says April through December. Okay. So if anyone who's listening has any questions about Paul's availability, you can contact him and he'll have all the info for you.
Yep.
Okay. Super, thank you.
Thank you.
I like the fact that this is, in a way, a water-dependent use. I mean, there's the boat there, so that
Yeah.
fits as well.
Yeah, yeah,
Great idea.
it's a good idea. So this is in a commercial fisheries 1 district. And as Courtney said, the uses are restricted to functionally water-dependent and accessory commercial fishing uses only. And so the applicant, which is the town, proposes to use a portion of the second-story office located above the Lobster Pound, and that will change the use from a commercial office to an institutional office. And in the endeavoring to be transparent, we wanted to just distinguish between those two, even though they're both office space. Both uses are non-conforming in the Commercial Fisheries 1 district. The shoreline zoning ordinance applies here, and it allows for the change of a non-conforming use with planning board approval. So we have the shoreline zoning ordinance that we have to comply with here. We also have to comply with the site plan review ordinance. That only applies to the change of non-residential use if the board determines that the new use will change the basic nature of the existing use and cause an increase in intensity on-site or off-site. So we'll be looking at the shoreline zoning ordinance and site plan review. So, let's see here. So I'm just going to summarize really quickly. We're looking at section 10.33 of the shoreline zoning ordinance, which deals with the change of use of a non-conforming structure. And in determining that no greater, and the applicant has provided written documentation that the use of the office it's not really changing and it will have no impact on environmental factors. So.
You read the rest of it?
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure whether I should read the whole thing. I'll start from 10.33. So the use of a non-conforming structure may not be changed to another use unless the planning board, after receiving a written application, determines that the new use will have no greater impact on a stream, tributary stream, coastal wetland, or freshwater wetland described in section 3 of the ordinance, or on the subject or adjacent properties and resources than the existing use. Some of this language is a little wordy. I'm always trying to figure out how to streamline things. So in determining that no greater adverse impact will occur, the planning board shall require written documentation from the applicant regarding the probable effects on public health and safety, erosion and sedimentation, water quality, fish and wildlife habitat, vegetative cover, visual and actual points of public access, and several other factors, including natural beauty, floodplain management, archaeological and historic resources, and then, of course, commercial fishing and maritime activities and other functionally water-dependent uses. So the applicant has provided written documentation in an application dated February 28th, 2025, which I think we've all read. And the use of the office will have no impact on environmental factors. The project has the benefit of increasing public health and safety by providing quicker and more reliable access for the harbor master to respond to ocean-based emergencies by having harbor master's auxiliary office and the boat in the same location. He will be able to spend more time on the water supporting commercial fishing and maritime activities. So based on the findings of, on the planner's findings of fact and the record for dated 3/14/2025, I will accept a motion regarding the shoreline zoning ordinance conformance. Anybody want to make a motion?
Okay, I move that the planning board finds that the applicant, Harpswell Harbor Master, has demonstrated that the change of use from a commercial office to an institutional office will have no greater impact subject and adjacent properties and resources, including water-dependent uses existing.
Anyone want to second that?
I'll second.
All right, Courtney seconds. Any discussion? All right, all in favor? All right, so we finished the shoreland zoning ordinance aspect of this review. And now we move on to its applicability with site plan review ordinance. So Section 3 of the site plan review ordinance addresses the applicability of this application, and it states that site plan review only applies if the conversion, this is very wordy, I'm going to read exactly what it says, but it's very wordy. It applies only if, quote, the conversion of an existing non-residential use in whole or in part to another non-residential use, if the planning board determines that the new use changes the basic nature of the existing use such that it increases the intensity of the on or off-site impacts that are subject to the standards and criteria of site plan review as described in Section 15 of this ordinance.
Wow.
Okay, so what we have here is a 10-page review, which are in the findings of fact that are referenced here, 15.1 through 15.22. I'm
Presented by our.
presented by our planner. They are in the findings of fact as submitted and as part of this record. So I'm going to, instead of going through all of those, first I'll ask, is there anyone who's got a question about any of them? Okay, they're pretty darn simple. So based on that,
Well, you should ask if there's public comment.
well, okay.
It's
Do
not gonna
any
be-
of the-
It's not going to be apparent. It's not going to be
Or
apparent that
anybody
this
on
isn't
the,
forward.
Okay.
street.
Yeah.
There could be?
They can't ask a
Maybe.
question.
No,
All
No,
right.
Oh, okay.
not a
no, it's
hundred.
not a two-way street.
Okay, okay.
All right, so I don't see any questions from the empty chairs, but that doesn't mean that there aren't questions. So based on the findings that are incorporated as part of this motion dated March 14th, 2025, I move that the planning board finds that the conversion of the second-story office space located on the northeast corner of the wharf from a commercial to institutional use does not change the basic nature of the existing non-residential use, and the site plan review ordinance is not applicable based on the findings that are incorporated by reference to this motion. Okay, any discussion? Okay, let's vote. All in favor? All right, so based on those findings, we now have the conclusions of law. In light of those findings of fact, with consideration given to the supporting documentation in the record, I move that the planning board reaches the following conclusions. The planning board finds that the application for the conversion of a commercial office to an institutional office on Lot 2-1 of tax map 26 is not subject to review under the site plan review ordinance. The planning board approves the application for a change of non-conforming use pursuant to the standards of the Shoreland Zoning Ordinance, Section 10.4.3, subject to the following conditions. This approval is based on the approved plans and on all submissions and information provided by the applicant at final approval, whether referenced in any findings or conditions of approval. Second, this approval is dependent upon and limited to the proposal and plans contained in the application and supporting documents submitted and affirmed to by the applicant. Any variation from the plan, proposals, and supporting documents except de minimis changes as determined by the town planner that do not affect approval standards is subject to the review and approval of the planning board prior to implementation. And third, prior to occupying the building, the applicant will erect a sign with the harbor master contact information in accordance with the Harpswell sign ordinance. So that's a motion.
Second.
Seconded by Courtney. Any discussion? All those in favor? All right, thank you. Wow, that was about the quickest we've ever done. Thank
Support
you.
and have a wonderful
Thank you.
office.
It's going to be wonderful.
Oh, I think it is.
I think it's a great idea.
What will happen next is we will do, turn the draft motions into a notice of decision. The chair will sign it and get it notarized, and we will get it recorded at the Registry of Deeds. Because the budget hasn't passed yet, Paul doesn't have the budget for this, but it's going to happen this weekend, and then that will allow Ethan to enter into contract negotiations with the administration and the select board.
That's great.
Yep.
Right. Well, we hope that this proves really successful for both parties and that we can move along and this will evolve into something even more interesting. All right.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
guys.
you. Nice job with the application, too.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay. All right, other business, consideration of minutes from December 17th, 2024, January 29th, February 12th, and February 19th.
We only got the first one.
Yeah.
December 17th. I found out today, Jim's not going to do the other three before he leaves.
Oh.
So we'll get them done, but they're just not done yet.
What's happening?
Jim
Jim's
Babarski, our communications expert, is taking a different job. But he was gone on vacation, and then now he's back. But he got the job offer while he was away on vacation, and so now it's kind of a scramble to get all of his work done before he's done on Friday. Yeah.
Friday.
Yep.
Like
Wow.
2 days Friday, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're getting lean over there, Margaret.
Really?
Uh-huh.
So maybe we need to hire a planning assistant soon.
Start with a code officer. We'll go from there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Codes, yeah, jeez.
Okay, so I will move that we approve the December 17th, 2024 minutes.
I didn't see any errors.
Second, any discussion? Okay, all in favor? Thank you.
Was that Howard that seconded it?
Okay, planners update. I understand we have 4 things.
I have a couple things. First of all, as you all know, Matt Gilley was elected to the select board, and he put in his papers to be done on the planning board. So he was done effective, I think, last Thursday. So that leaves an opening if you know of anybody. The select board can also canvass, and Amy and I had discussed maybe putting an ad in the Harpswell Anchor. So I will reach out to the administration and see if that is something that we can do. But there is an opening. Next, we had talked at the last meeting about an opening on resiliency and sustainability.
Somebody wanted.
Yeah, from the planning board. Lori has turned down this opportunity.
We've got a little too much going on right
Yeah. So Amy, you had
I'm happy to do it.
You want to do it? Okay. I will pass that along. And as everybody knows, there's town meeting this weekend. They've taken off the 3 big more controversial items, so it's mostly budget.
But
Has
there'll
there
still
been
be
a,
discussion? Oh,
has-
sorry.
I think you're going to ask the same
Yeah.
question I did, which is, has there been a date for a public hearing on those or open forum on those more controversial items? Yeah.
The June is supposed to be maybe, I think, the fire station, and when we usually vote at the school board budget, they are proposing to put the fire station and Mitchell Field admin building on that docket, and then November would be the comp plan.
But that's Well, what that is that's on the ballot.
Right.
That isn't an open discussion. And what I've been seeing a lot of is people saying, when are we going to have an opportunity to have the kind of open discussion that people came to that meeting for?
Absolutely. I think it's a valid question.
Yeah, and I think
Will
you
there
would,
be a public, if any changes are made, will there have to be at least one public meeting on
There
that?
will have to be a public hearing.
Yeah, a
Yes.
public
Are they
hearing for
intending to
people
make any
to.
changes in the comp plan?
Pardon me?
Do they intend to make changes, further changes?
This is a great entree into something that I wanted to bring up. We are going to meet on the 26th, so next week, we're going to meet, and I think it's at 6 o'clock here, and we will be sort of doing an autopsy on the plan, because Kevin Johnson said at the select board meeting that his feeling was that if the vote had been taken, it would not have passed. I think we'll be really looking at why it didn't pass. I know we will be. Why it didn't pass and looking at what changes we can make. I would really like to encourage the planning board to be involved in the comprehensive plan effort. And actually, I'm going to hold off on that until Margaret's finished, because,
So,
are you finished?
yeah, the only other thing I wanted to touch on was the shoreline zoning workshop last week. I have not had a chance to watch it because I'm still waiting for it to be uploaded. But if anybody has any comments or follow-up questions or anything that I can help facilitate, obviously we're going to have to schedule some more workshops. But until I watch the meeting, I don't really know what the questions are.
There was a lot
When
of
you watch
information.
it,
Yeah.
I think our next step be a workshop with Judy
Okay.
present or by Zoom.
Mm-hmm.
You mean on the maps?
So that we can ask questions about what the capabilities of the GIS system are in mapping kinds of things that I believe Jeff wants.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe perhaps things that we want. Because if this is probably going to be the only opportunity in the next 10 years to tighten up the resource protection zone if we wanted to. If we don't, we got to fight the battle sometime. And the fact that it affects people is a concern, but doesn't the resource protection trump all that? I mean,
From all of what?
the individual property owners' concerns have to be balanced against the community,
That's always the problem, isn't it?
which is the problem.
There's another factor that's going on. I mentioned it to you earlier. Obviously, I'm in the insurance industry. And coastal guidelines have been changing drastically and driven primarily by reinsurers. That's where insurance companies get their insurance money from. What protects us. So right now, what's happening is the borderline, it used to be like 1,000 feet, hard no. It's now coastal guidelines are going 10 miles into the interior because that's how far the wind does carry in. And I've been through some of those storms, so I can vouch for it. But I'm also noticing on like Zillow, you go to the very bottom of listings, they have a climate risk factor being played in, and it shows on wind, flood, all that's being factored in. Some of these properties are uninsurable. So even if they want to build, they'll have to do it out of pocket, fully exposed. So it's not just us, that's another factor that's coming into a very real play.
That's really helpful information. I think to speak to what Howard said, I feel that private property owners need to be respected because they're private property owners. And I know you agree with me on that. So I forget who it was that mentioned it. Maybe it was our person behind the camera here. But I think a lot of this is education. And so what we want to do really is make sure that we work with the property owners so that they understand why and how the zoning changes or the setbacks or whatever it is are meaningful and how it protects everybody. So, yeah, definitely need to be transparent and invite the public in on this stuff. But I want to thank you for putting that together, Margaret.
Yeah.
And I really was chagrined that not chagrined, but I was disappointed that you weren't able to be there, because I know you would have really,
Yeah, I would have gotten a lot out of it, but that's all right. I'll watch the
Yeah.
Oh, you
meeting
can
and-
watch it.
okay.
I think the biggest difficulty, the fact that the language that he wants us is not comprehensible.
Yeah.
You cannot understand or make any kind of a judgment or explain
Similar to our
to someone who
ordinances.
gets caught up in it what the difference between the 500 feet and the 1,000 feet.
No.
And it doesn't make a whole lot of sense that one house, depending on where the lot lines are.
Yeah, and Ann Card, who I think is with the Conservation Commission, really tried to explain that to the DEP guy, and he did not get it. He couldn't understand her point. Matt Gilley actually began the discussion, and he didn't understand Matt, and so Ann took up the cause, and it still wasn't really explained. So Howard's completely right. It's really, it needs
Kind of
work.
frustrating.
Yes, Mary Ann.
I know I'm not on the agenda. However, I'm Mary Ann Nave on the Conservation Commission. Just listening to your conversation, I thought it was a good opportunity because we were discussing in our meeting today. We are trying to work with property owners to understand why it's in their interest to move property back, to revegetate. So we are having a plants, the importance of plants. Our next, it's not a workshop, basically. It's going to be kind of like a little display and some talks in the middle of May, at which we're going to start addressing, how to treat the shoreline to your interest, how to think about it when you're planning your development, not later. I just thought I'd mention it because we're going to try to get the word out on this. I'm going to be at the school. We're going to have some displays of the types of plants that are best to work on various soils. Talk about holding as much water on the soil to help regenerate your aquifer. It'll help your drinking water. So anyhow, we're just in the planning stage. We just changed the date. It's going to be like the third Saturday in May. And hope it can work into what you're trying to do, basically, because I think it goes a lot to trying to understand the ordinances, which are very hard to understand.
Yes, they are.
But unless you can relate them to what people are trying to do, I think that's a help. So I just figured I'd take this time to mention it.
Yeah.
And when you come up with that display, I can speak for the library, the Horizontal Library, is that we'd love to have that display up so that when people are at the library, they can learn more about it too.
Yeah, well, right now, but yes, that would be nice to have it there at the library afterwards. Right now, we're thinking of getting some live displays outside the school ahead of time so that people can look at different plants and see what's invasive. But anyhow, we're still planning.
Do you have any videos of the storm?
Yeah.
'Cause that would be really, that's very eye-catching. I mean, we approved a house, where was it? It had to be raised up, so it was raised up. But when I went down there last February, a year ago February, if that house had not been raised up, it would have been completely flooded. As it
Right.
was, a probably $10,000 wrought iron fence had been completely destroyed.
Right.
Intervale.
Intervale, thank you.
Right.
Septic system underwater. Lori's absolutely right. It's
And
something,
it's, personally, it's happened to me where
The Mitchell
they wouldn't insure me 4 years ago. And I'm 80 feet up over the water, but they're looking at a map and they're saying you're too close to the water. So I had to find another company. So everybody needs to make their own decisions on their property. However, I think we beneficial for us to make them aware of, what to think about.
thank you,
Thank you.
thank you.
I'm just curious to ask Lori a question, just because you brought it up about the insurance. Do companies contact realtors with these guidelines? I'm just thinking about somebody coming into Harpswell to buy a piece of property, not realizing that they are getting something that they can't perhaps build on for a certain, because they can't be insured for a certain distance.
That would be more an insurance agent, because a carrier deals with thousands of agents. And if you now get down to a realtor level where people are coming and going, there's just no way they could keep up with it all. But independent agents are usually part of the community, and that they would have a lot better knowledge on that.
Yeah, I mean, it seems tricky for somebody coming in not knowing that until you've got
And
the
it's
property.
been
and
mentioned, there's been property that has been sold and then put back on the market because the new owners could not get insurance. And I'm looking at a couple that are listed right now, and they're fully exposed. And I think it would be a hard one. It's not saying you can't get insurance, though there are some places, it usually goes what they call surplus line, which is where a standard carrier, nobody will touch it. And then it kind of like Lloyd's of London, where you can insure somebody's legs for $1 million. But those usually you get less coverage, a higher cost.
Yeah, okay.
Or you self-insure.
Just really fast before we end this discussion about shoreline zoning, this was here, I don't need a copy. It's a letter from a man out on Pole Island, which is off Pinkham Point Road. I have talked to him extensively. He never liked in my opinion, he never really liked my answers, so he wrote up a letter that essentially talks about the same things that we've talked about, but it's the same issues a lot of people had,
Thank you.
His lot was considered, undeveloped, but his neighbor was developed, so he was affected, but his neighbor wasn't. And he's looking at all these properties around him on Pinkham Point Road that are all commercial fishing zoned, so they're excluded from this regulation, but Pole Island, right in the middle, is shoreline residential. Yeah, you can see on the map.
Yep.
So it's just something he sent that a communication for everybody on the board. Hopefully, we will revise our map, and this will be a non-issue. But yeah, I talked to him more than I've talked to anybody else, and he's out on an island, He just really he did not like the maps, so.
Right, well, thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, something.
Yeah, we have some specific changes to make for sure. So maybe we could get on that. I know you
Yeah.
hoped to have it done a while ago, but it's
Yeah.
like,
Then I was maybe thinking the June town meeting, if we could get it done, but if we can't, next March sounds just fine too.
okay,
Yeah,
all right.
If you read this, he just says that he can't find the derivation of the 501,000 foot rule. He's correct.
yeah,
It's not a written rule. It's not an amendment to guidance 1,000. And it's just a position that the DEP takes. But they do have jurisdiction to, over the shoreline zoning ordinances.
Aquaman.
Aquaman, yeah. It's really frustrating. That it doesn't make any sense, and it's not written down.
and what I don't understand is every other community has to deal with this. And I looked at some of the neighboring communities with similar populations as us, and nobody else's map came out the way that ours did. So what standards and what metrics are they using that we are not using? Because obviously there's a discrepancy there.
Yeah, that was going to be my question.
Yeah.
Would it behoove you to be in touch with them in more detail?
With neighboring communities?
Just ask, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. it's something I've considered. I was hoping we could solve it internally, but we can also,
Oh, I would always reach out
Yeah.
to your professional colleagues
Yeah.
and see what they're doing, because
Yeah.
they've been through it.
yeah, I looked at like Phippsburg. Phippsburg had a really interesting map where it looked like the whole coast of Phippsburg in the 75-foot setback was resource protection, which I thought was interesting. But, yeah.
All right, clearly more work to
Oh,
do.
that would hit the fan.
I
Yeah,
don't see
that-
that being a success.
Yeah, no, that would not work. Okay. Thank you, Margaret. The only thing that I really wanted to do is the comprehensive plan, as it moved forward over the last 2 years, didn't really have a lot of planning board input. And I think since we're kind of going back into really taking a look at it again, I'd like to just get a feeling from the planning board and the planner. If you would like to be more involved in what the comp plan task force is doing and, you know, as is appropriate, if you would like communication to be via memos, or if you know, the public can always attend the meetings, but the planning board is going to have to, at some point, implement what comes out of the comp plan. So it seems to me that we're missing a step if planning board members aren't inputting into the process right in the beginning.
Do you honestly think that they're going to board to implement?
Well, who else would be
They're gonna have
implementing
another
any
committee.
ordinances?
They're going to have another committee.
Well, right?
I
But we
think
would
Kevin's
still
already
have
said
to-
that.
We wouldn't be involved? I mean, I don't know.
Well, we have to be involved. We'd have to hold a hearing,
Right.
public hearing, anytime there's a land use ordinance. But that's all. We wouldn't be tasked with writing the.
Oh,
document
no.
Or, you know, developing which ones get changed and what,
And these are not land use ordinance changes,
well,
right? This
no,
is-
if you have a design, sure they are. There's zoning changes, the interior zone. If you're going to drop the minimum lot size down to some function of bedrooms, that's a zoning change.
That's, at this point, that's just part of the plan. There is no change. If we adopt the comprehensive plan, that
That's-
doesn't
that's
automatically change the interior.
That's correct.
Stuff,
But
right?
normally, the process then is that some committee, usually a plan, but it could be another committee, like the comprehensive plan was a separate committee. They could have asked the planning board to develop it, but they didn't.
Isn't there an implementation committee that's
Yeah.
been mentioned, or I'm
Yeah.
not making that up,
How
right?
it will play out, I mean, this is part of our discussion.
Yeah.
And the comprehensive plan is the foundation for the zoning ordinances that follow. By law, the zoning ordinances have to be based on the comprehensive plan. So it does make a difference what the plan says, because if they are not consistent, then we are legally responsible for that, and we could be in trouble, in legal hot water for
Well, you
that.
couldn't develop a plan. You couldn't develop the ordinance. You're not required to implement. You can't have inconsistencies between the ordinances and the comp.
Because that opens up a legal.
That opens
Yeah.
up a legal challenge. It happened, yeah, you can't. So it does behoove us to look at the foundational, the bedrock on which the implementation will be based, and then to have some, what's the word I'm looking for the board to have some understanding among board members about what is moving forward with implementation, if we're all still on the board, because we're the ones that enforce the ordinances, and we have on-the-ground, in-the-trenches experience with implementing the ordinances. So I just think we have expertise and experience that even if we're not on the implementation committee, my question to you is, are you interested in, you know, when the time comes, in being kept apprised? If so, how would you like that to happen? We don't have to answer that tonight, but just think about it.
No, absolutely. We need to be in the loop.
Well, I agree, completely. But some of the criticism of the comp plan can't be undone. Because if you make the argument that the comp plan was developed without a whole lot of public participation, a lot of that is because the public wasn't allowed to see the drafts as they through the process. That's a past problem that can't be resolved. It is what it is. And the fact that there were public hearings or attempts to get public participation at the end, when nobody had the documents, see the words, even those of us who went to a lot of the meetings couldn't see the words. They weren't allowed to come out. So I don't know if you can resolve the problem.
Well, I think that's one good thing about not having a vote come up until November, because I think there should be opportunity to make changes or to suggest changes and then have public hearings and have people come and speak about it. So I think I feel bad for Al and the rest of you guys who've been on this thing since the dawn of time, but that at least gives the time to make possible changes and have people come out and talk about it. Because November is November. It's not like June, it's not next week.
It will
So-
only feel, but it'll feel like
I'm
it.
sure,
That's
I'm
gonna
sure
come
it
back.
will, but
Yeah.
I think, well, people are gonna have to
Well, I
be
think you
willing
could
to look at changes if there are any and see what they think.
I think you can solve the problem of the housing report. The housing report's the housing report. Okay, you guys wrote it, the committee wrote it, they're happy with it. The selectmen are happy with it because they approved it. That doesn't mean that it has to just be incorporated willy-nilly into the comp plan as a whole, because there are sections of that are controversial. So you could change the language in the comp plan that doesn't incorporate all of the report, or incorporate some of it, or there are several options in that kind of a vein. Or you could take the sections that are applicable in the housing that everybody would agree to and write specific goals and objectives into the comp plan. Specifically, without incorporating anything, you would actually put it into the comp plan. It'd take the time to do that. And then the issues that were objected to at the prior town meeting, Mitchell Field and Dowdy Point, would be removed, which is an easy thing to do.
No, they're not in the comp plan.
No, but
No.
they sure are by incorporating the
Yeah.
housing report.
Yes,
Which
they
you
are.
kept them in there.
Yes, they
It says, at the behest of future select board, something may be done.
But
And that's,
see, this is the
This
whole,
is the disagreement.
this is the disagreement and the whole issue around transparency. And the other thing with transparency, I think, when you have two separate committees, and is the housing, this is going to be one of the questions I'm going to ask next week, because what I understood was that a member of the select board basically said the housing report will be in the comp plan. And that is, that's not transparent, and it's not part of the public process. The other thing, and I don't fault anybody for this, but the consultant, even though almost $100,000 of public money was spent, not all Harpswell taxpayer money, but public money, as the task force went about its work, and as the public was asked for input, the only way you could get a copy of the report was on the computer. You had to go into the town website and then go through several layers of information before you found the draft comp plan. For many people, that just wasn't accessible enough. It wasn't transparent enough, and it wasn't accessible enough, and it was also a moving target. People from the task force couldn't tell whether the changes that they had proposed had actually been made or hadn't been made. It was very frustrating. And yours truly suggested that we print the whole thing out and that we sit down together as a group and go through chapter by chapter. I made that suggestion 4 times and we never did it. And I think the part of the reason that we are where we are is that never happened. And so, as Howard says, you can't undo that.
But you guys went almost 2 years on inventory chapters without ever talking about land use.
That's true.
And it's the land use that is critical to the future planning for the town. So tell me why that happened.
Well, it happened because
The consultant asked to set the agenda.
the
Yeah.
consultant set the agenda.
Well, and I think Howard makes an excellent point. The comp plan doesn't have to be extraordinarily granular. Because if this is a plan that's going to be. Granular.
I heard that, but I don't get it.
It doesn't have to be
It doesn't
extremely.
have to be down to the specific
Thank you.
Yeah.
regulations that you would, and it's not supposed to be regulatory. And there are several sections of the comp plan
Yeah.
that says we won't do this.
Yeah.
And we'll change the zoning to be, 20,000 feet or 15,000 feet, depending on the number of bedrooms. I think the worst, there's just so many things. But to say that and this is from, I don't know where this one came, say that there would be design standards based on neighborhoods, based on some feeling of what the design of a New England town should look like, makes absolutely no sense. Gives no guidance to anyone. And for someone that's written a comp plan and land use regulations with design standards, it's the most difficult thing in the world to, number one, do, and do it legally.
Yeah.
Because you can't have, design is subjective, not an objective thing. You can't say we're going to be a New England village, and say that's sufficient to create design standards. So that would be no modern houses
I think.
in Harpswell anymore.
I hope that we can use this time, I'm not sure that we will, but I hope we can, to really talk about comprehensive issues. The most detailed future land use recommendations in the entire comprehensive plan come in the housing report, which isn't even part of the comp plan, but it is part of the comp plan. There's no other place in the comprehensive plan where specific zoning ordinance changes mentioning lot size and all of those things are found. It's only in the housing report. And that's why I was concerned about, that's why I remain concerned about implementation, because that's very specific implementation policy. And so the other thing is we don't, as Howard said, we didn't talk about traffic. We didn't talk about how do you keep rural character. We talk, we address those because you have to address them, but we never really sat down as a committee and said, what is the rural, like I had to drive the committee kicking and screaming to stand up there with a flip chart and say, what do you think rural character is in Harpswell? I've still got the flip chart pages. It was.
The funny thing is, they spent more time in the comp plan on farming than they did on the shoreline zone, where everybody lives.
Yeah.
A lot of people live.
Anyway,
The overall, value in terms of tax is in the shoreline zone, not in the interior zone.
well, I think
It will be.
I think we can fix it. I think we can move the comp plan forward. My question for the planning board is, we have a lot of experience and it's a public meeting, so I would encourage you to get involved and come to the meetings if you can. I know it's another meeting, but let me know, think about how, or Margaret think about how you want to receive information, if you want to receive it as a board, and how we want as a board to structure any input that we might want to have, because I'm sure our input would be welcome. So do that. Think about it.
Well, keep us updated on what the status is of meetings and stuff like that.
Yep.
And we'll get involved to the extent we can.
If there are going to
Next Tuesday night at 6 p.m. here in this room.
Yep.
Is what?
The next
Is it-
comp plan meeting.
Comp plan meeting.
Oh,
Yeah. Now you know.
very good. The more you know.
All right, thank you for that great discussion, really appreciate it. That's all I've got. Does anybody have anything else? Okay, declare the meeting adjourned.